Hi, and welcome to our very exciting first edition of Natterbox, which is a podcast discussing all things mental health and myth busting in the law industry. So, I am delighted to welcome back Chris Bowers, who some of you may recognise from the podcast we did for Mental Health Week in November, which was so popular. We're coming back for a whole series, aren't we, Chris?
Yeah, it's a partnership, isn't it? Straight away after that podcast, we said, well, we should do this more often. So we got our own podcast now, and this
We
is
do.
the first episode, one of many, hopefully. I think we're going to try and do one every month and talk about mental health in the news and have interviews with people. We've already got, I think, six or so lined up.
Yeah.
And yeah, trying to. I mean, obviously this week it's Mental Health Awareness Week.
It is.
I
It
think.
is this week, so we'll have a little chat about that as well while we're
Yeah.
on. And so the format that we came up with, because Chris and I both love a podcast
Yeah.
in all different forms. Uh, we've got a couple of rules. So there's no swearing,
Mhm.
there's no talking about politics
Yeah.
or going off on whatever with Chris. We've already laid that
Yeah.
groundwork in there. So hopefully it'll be a nice informative chat about everything that we kind of can as Chris said, things are in the news, special guests that have got different experiences that we can chat about. And we're also going to have a chat about what our uplift for each podcast is as well, aren't we? So we thought we'd use
Yeah.
a legal term to
Yeah.
say what our peak of
Well,
the session is.
it's my favourite legal term because obviously an uplift means something you can add on to your bill. So yeah, I think we try and sort of keep it a positive conversation, which is
Yeah,
what I think we had in our podcast back in November last year.
it
Uh,
was.
but whilst also, sort of dealing with obviously a very serious topic. But I think the best way to sort of talk about mental health is to speak to people about their own journey, because I think, as I said in the podcast last time, everyone has a brain, everyone has that organ, and everyone has to check in with themselves and make sure they're okay. And I think that one of the goals for me of this podcast is to sort of lift that stigma that comes with talking about mental health, not mental health itself. I think it's about sort of being open about your own situation, your own journey. And I think that's one of the real positives the positive feedback I got from the last podcast were people contacting me directly and saying, how much they enjoyed it and how what they took from it personally. But what was interesting is that a lot of that feedback came directly. It wasn't something that was public, because I published it on my Facebook, and obviously it went on LinkedIn. And I think some comments were posted online, but the majority of the feedback came to me directly. And I think that tells its own story.
It
People are
does.
still a little afraid to sort of, put themselves out there and talk about their own experiences.
I think that's really true, and it's a really good point because we both were very overwhelmed, actually, weren't we, with the feedback we got from that
Yeah.
podcast because we were both quite open and honest. And I think what really struck me was that a lot of people came and told me their stories and things
Yes.
because we work in as a lot of jobs are, it's a highly pressurized industry. It's very target driven. There's a lot to it. There's emails flying around all the time and things like that. And it is a situation where mental health, you have to look after it as much as your physical health. I'm a really big believer in that.
Absolutely.
And we talked in the last podcast as well about you, Chris, really normalizing going to therapy. And
Yeah.
the thing that you said to me that's really really struck a chord is it's like going to the gym for your physical health, for you
Yeah.
that you chat about your mental health, and it really helps you to get in a better place and be more, be quite balanced and everything. And I just thought that was a really interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's ongoing as well. It's not. I think I started therapy thinking that 6 months and I'll be cured, whatever that means. And it's not about a cure. As I say, you don't go to the gym for 6 months and then assume that after 6 months you'll be buff and have your beach body and it'll stay forever. You've got to keep at it.
Mm. Exactly. Although I need to go to the gym for 6 months because trying to get this dress on zipped up this morning was a bit of a struggle. So, so I perhaps need it. But what's your uplift for this podcast, Chris? What good has happened to you?
Well, I mean, this is a bit of a cop out, but it's starting this podcast. You know,
Oh,
for a number of reasons. I mean, obviously, mainly because I enjoyed the last one so much because of what we discussed about how much we believe in it. But also, it's something I've always wanted to do. I mean,
I know it's your
let's not
ambition, isn't it, to do a
let's not. If the last podcast had been a complete dud, we'd still probably do this.
I think so. And the lovely thing for me is we've got to know each other. See,
Yeah,
although I know your wife very well because she's
yeah,
my boss as well as being
and she's
brilliant,
my boss as
and
well.
she's your boss as well. But being a really inspirational person. But other than that, we'd not really spoken that much before we did the first podcast, and then we ended up having a really deep conversation. And then ever
Mm.
since, we just had this lovely relationship. And I really look forward to when you're in Manchester. We can have a
Oh,
lovely little chat, and it's
dude,
good. But
yeah,
that's been nice.
we hadn't spoken at all.
No,
Despite the fact that you know, worked with Keller for so long, and I'd seen your podcast with her, which was probably a couple of years ago now.
yeah, I think it
Um,
was.
but no, we hadn't. And then sort of, other than maybe the odd sort of nod, like right, right,
Yeah.
and then to sort of have our first real proper conversation, talking about talking honestly and openly about something so personal. I
Mm,
think that you're right. I think that sort of sparked a relationship, a very good relationship, and
mm.
one that I'm really happy to be a part of. And I think that hopefully we can do some real good here. So yeah, that was a weird experience. That I don't think I've ever um, in terms of meeting somebody for the first time, because I think I might mention in the podcast, I'm quite sort of shy when it comes to meeting new people. So to sort of dive in straight away was a unique experience. So anyway, but that's what's your uplift?
Oh,
You
well, I
don't have
feel
to say it's
pressured
me
now
now,
because
Mike. You don't have to
now,
say it's me.
yeah, it's you. It's Chris Bowers. It's
No,
you.
no, no.
It's two uplifts. Firstly, the technology's worked on this because I was having anxiety dreams at 5 o'clock this morning that it wouldn't work. But no, I think there's loads of. I mean, loads of uplifts, loads of good things are happening at the minute. I think the uplift for me is we're about to kick off the graduate recruitment process at
Right.
work, which I really enjoyed. I love, and I think probably that's because a lot of it is I like listening to people's stories and I like listening to where they've come from and what they've got to offer. I think that's really it's really great experience. So I'm looking forward to that and this podcast and many other things to come. But I've got to save some uplifts for the next podcast. So don't want to overshoot the first one.
No,
But
no.
we've got lots of good things coming up, and that's great. We'll talk about those on forthcoming ones.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
and in the news, I suppose we've touched on it already. It's
Mm,
Mental Health Awareness Week this week,
mm,
and I was having a quick of as I do doing my morning LinkedIn trawl, seeing what was going on and what people have posted because sometimes I find it quite interesting to see what people are talking about. And there
mm,
was one post that really resonated with me because it's an employment partner at another firm who posts quite prolifically on LinkedIn, but had said they'd seen lots of posts on LinkedIn about Mental Health Awareness Week, but nothing really from senior leaders.
mm,
And I thought that's quite interesting because obviously senior leaders aren't immune to there being mental health challenges in the workplace, probably, equally, if not more than some other people. But I thought that was a really interesting point, especially with the statistics that are kind of coming out about law and how it's one of the most, reported stressful environments and things like that. I just thought, oh, that's quite an interesting little viewpoint from somebody, whether it's true. But then I looked back and thought, oh, actually, I haven't seen that much. I've seen it from the usual people posting, but not really that. So just thought that was interesting, really.
that I think that's a generational thing. I think that
You could be right.
most leaders are, you know, Gen X and dare I say boomers these days, and maybe the odd millennial in there. And I think that, um, I mean, my own journey, I was how old was I? I was 46 before I realised that there was something that I needed to explore, and it was a real revelation to me.
Mm.
There wasn't. It was something I did off my own bat. It wasn't something that I felt my peer group knew how to cope with, or that was. I mean, it's obviously there is support out there, but you've got to seek it out.
Yeah.
So I think that the younger generations will probably be better at this.
Mm.
I think again, I just don't think people have the language, that they don't know how to speak about it. So I don't think it's because people in leadership are fine and they don't have anything to say
No,
about
I
it.
agree.
Quite the opposite. Quite the
Mm.
opposite. With the stress that comes with being a manager, with being a leader. I just don't think they have the tools to sort of know what to say and know what to do. And I think that's why, I mean, it's great that we have weeks like this, but we don't want them to be sort of just paying lip service
Mm.
to something that's so important.
Yeah, no, I agree. Totally agree. I think that's a really important thing. We're actually doing an event with Pro Manchester about intergenerational experience from the LGBTQ perspective
Right.
in June, which will be quite interesting to talk about. I think we've got a couple of Generation X, a couple of millennials, and a couple of Gen Zs in.
Am I on that? I saw something in my diary about that.
You
Is that in
might be.
June?
You
Is that in
might well
June?
be. It's
What
in
what
our office. So
what
yeah,
date is it?
I think it's the 12th of June, so we can plug that actually. So that's great. But I think that'll be really interesting from the perspective of
Mm.
looking into generations and how people's experiences have been. And that's why I say it's quite interesting to then look at it and think, well, it goes to that point again that that visibility and you can only be what you see. I think is
Mm.
quite an important thing as well, isn't it, for openly honesty? So interesting. It'll be a really interesting event. I'm looking forward to
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
cool.
Excellent. Well,
Shall we
shall we?
introduce our
I was
guest?
just going to say
Mm.
she's been waiting very patiently, so I think we should do.
I think I'll do a brief introduction, although obviously she'll be able to sort of give us more insight into her role at Forbes and her own journey. So I think we're delighted to introduce our first guest, Laura Docker. I think she was top of our list, wasn't she, when we were
She
talking
was.
about, because she's been a real sort of a real voice for neurodivergence within the firm. She is the team leader of the Forbes Debt Collect service, which is within my department. She's been with us since May last year. I don't want to embarrass her, but she's settled in superbly well and done a fantastic job with the department, and is very well liked within the team and the wider firm. So
Oh, I
uh,
second that. She's very popular in the
she
Manchester
is, she
office.
is.
Very
So
popular.
yeah, she's holding her face there. She's probably gone very bright red. So, Laura, welcome to the
Yeah.
podcast, to the inaugural podcast.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's actually really great to be on, and just sort of hearing you guys talk about, just generally have that chat about mental health. It's really, really nice to hear. And yes, and it's coming from a leadership team as well. So I think it's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Now, do you want to give
Yeah.
us sort of just a brief overview of how you found your first year at Forbes and how that has sort of dovetailed into your own mental health journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, joined Forbes a year ago, last May, probably about a week last year. And Forbes has been absolutely fantastic as a firm to work for. The everybody from the senior leadership down is willing to sort of stop and have a chat, and that's just not something you get with every firm. So it's actually really, really nice. I suppose for me, the massive challenge has been, in the context of this podcast, is being trying to manage neurodiversity. I was diagnosed with ADHD about 2 years ago, and I think that for me, it was. It explained a lot of things about sort of my life and how things had gone. But in one sense, it was a relief because there'd always been these challenges that I'd assumed was because not that I'm particularly sort of a person that's naturally down on myself, but there just wasn't any other explanation for things that I'd been struggling with, except for the fact that I was lazy or didn't care about other people, or and there just wasn't any other explanation available. until I found out that there was a reason, and I had ADHD. So on the one hand, it was a bit of a relief, but on the other hand, I'd always assumed that there would be some solution to these problems. I hadn't found it yet, but plenty of people seem to manage quite well, so the solution was there, surely. So to find out that there is actually a reason that I was struggling with things like time management and organisation, to find that you start looking for solutions based on ADHD, and a lot of the solutions are quite similar to just what I'd tried before. And so one of the things that I'm doing now, and have been sort of for the last few months, is working with a coach to try and put strategies in place to manage the time management and manage my day and manage all the emails that come flying through. And that's something that's been huge relief, but also slightly intimidating, because there's actually a reason that it's not easy, and there aren't any sort of easy solutions. So that's kind of where I've got to. But Forbes is just, it's so nice to be able to say, yes, actually there's a reason that this is a challenge for me, and to be able to talk about that, and to be able to say, yeah, okay, these are the solutions that I'm working on right now. It's been really, really nice to be able to have that. So that's sort of the first year.
Oh, I'm really glad though. That's really nice, because I know we've been working a lot, because we've got a neurodiversity specialist interest group now, haven't we? We're
Yes, of
leading.
course,
Have
yeah.
you found that useful? And because I
Yeah,
know that's become a real
absolutely.
community, hasn't it? Or it's really
Yeah,
grown legs really quickly, which is
yeah,
lovely.
it's absolutely brilliant. Sorry. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And one of the things that people with ADHD, or neurodiversity in general, will find is that it can be isolating. You feel like you don't know that there are other people. But I think because we're all sort of very good at masking, you don't realize that there are other people, sort of struggling with the same things. So it can be isolating. So to just have that community where you can sort of say, this just happened. Please tell me this isn't just me. It's just been such a relief. So those people in that group have just been an invaluable resource, and it's just been so nice to just have that and be able to talk about things like that. I think when I first started, there were only two people. One was Grace. So yeah, it's that neurodiversity group, and I think it's just sort of the slightly more formal way of just bringing the awareness to the firm in general, and explaining about ourselves, to almost explaining myself to the world. It just feels really nice to have that. Yeah, that special interest group has been fantastic, and I know there's the other groups as well. And I hope that sort of brings that feeling of belonging and sort of connection to sort of people across the business.
When you were talking about your diagnosis, there was a word that popped into my mind straight away, and you've used it a couple of times, which is relief. I was reading online about a barrister who was advising on I think it was a personal injury case, and the solicitors had commissioned a report on their client, which basically diagnosed them with ADHD. And the barrister apparently got in touch with the solicitor to say, this report isn't good enough. I've read it through. Everybody sort of, has these issues. And the solicitor said, no, that's not true. And through that barrister discovered that they needed to go and get a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I think that when I went for when I sort of started to go to therapy and realized that there was something I needed to deal with, that relief was fantastic, because it sort of explains so much. Because part of depression, part of the spiral, is sort of assuming that things are the way they are because it's your fault, because it's you, and that just makes things 10 times worse. So that automatically it lifts you straight away. So I just wanted to know, how did the relief sort of feel to you, and also how does it impact on your sort of journey, or how has it impacted on your journey these last couple of years?
I think if you go back to sort of when I was a kid and coming up through school and university and just work, I was always the kid that had the head in the clouds or a nose in a book. And I think it got harder and harder sort of through school and university. So by the time I got to university, I couldn't make myself sit down and struggle. And sorry, I couldn't just sit down and make myself study, and I ended up dropping out of university in my final year. I sort of got to my sort of early mid-20s. I started doing the Silex, or ILEX as it was then, and I sort of told myself, well, you've grown up now, you can do this, it'll be different this time. And even then I still struggled to study, to make myself sit down. I got through my exams by sort of essentially camping out in a coffee shop, and that was the only thing that I could do to get through. And I made it through and did okay. But by the time I'd got to sort of mid-30s and the diagnosis, because it impacts just so many areas of your life, your personal life, your school, college, work, driving, relationships, everything. I'd basically got to a point where I just thought I was incompetent at life in general, a little bit. So yes, in terms of the diagnosis, I think the first assessment that I went for an autism assessment, and they told me that I had traits of autism, but what I actually had was ADHD, and that was when I started to look and think. And we said no swearing, but on this podcast. But honestly, the feeling of, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to swear, but
Bleep.
it was completely overwhelming. And there's probably a few months where it was constantly, that's why I do that, or that's why this happens, or that's why I feel that way. So, and, you hear people talk about sort of shame of, because you can't sit down and study, you must be lazy, because you try and motivate yourself and you say, well, you're part of a team, so just do it for the other members of the team. And that doesn't work. And it really does build into that sort of sense of guilt and shame. So to get that sort of confirmation that actually the brain chemistry doesn't, there's a reason your brain isn't actually letting you study or letting you do that work. And it's not my fault. That was absolutely enormous. And there's still moments today where I have that moment of, oh, so that's why I do that then. And just little things just slotting into place and just making sense about your life. So it was absolutely enormous. It was very much life-changing for me to find that. It was huge.
Can I just ask, 'cause I'm really interested in
Um,
the there's a lot of diagnoses happening later on in life. Not
Yeah.
later on, because you're still a very young woman, but comparably, that it's not at school age that this is getting picked up. It's when people become into their professional life and a little bit older. Do you think things it's because the knowledge has moved on slightly, or we find it there's more and more females becoming diagnosed later, a little bit later on than school age? Do you think women do tend to mask it a little bit more, or is it a sex thing, or is it a just a generational thing, or what was your experience of it?
I think partly historically, the perception of ADHD was, the boys bouncing around the classroom, but the girls more typically present as daydreamers. And that was very, very much me. But we weren't causing problems behaviorally. We got on with it. We flew under the radar academically. And there just wasn't too much research. People didn't really know that it happened in women as well, and girls as well. But I think in terms of the number of people getting diagnosed, certainly for me, the pandemic hit me quite hard in terms of that switch between working in an office and having that routine, and then working at home. But it was very much, I think, going to come to a head at some point, regardless of the pandemic. And so I think, just pausing there. Sorry, what was the question again? I've completely
No,
lost my
it's
train of thought.
fine. No, it's fine. So it's about kind
Women
of
being
diagnosis.
diagnosed later.
Women being
Yeah.
diagnosed later. Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay. So yeah, so I think women being diagnosed later, and I think part of that is because there's the awareness, in schools and in a professional life of what to look out for, and what how the symptoms can present differently, depending on what sort of type of ADHD that you have, and what else you might have. People get to, dyslexia or autism together with it. If you have ADHD and autism together, then there's a real conflict in how your brain works with that. So there's so many different presentations. But yes, you can have hyperactive, impulsive ADHD, or you can have a sort of combined type, or you can have the inattentive type, which it's more me. I'm the inattentive type. And I think, there's a lot of people sort of not necessarily being diagnosed later in life, or this is how it seems to me anyway, but people are sort of being diagnosed in the last sort of 5 to 10 years because awareness is growing. And certainly when I got diagnosed, the firm that I was at was that there was a sort of information piece on the sort of intranet, with symptoms and what to look out for. So I do think awareness is massively growing, and people are sort of getting that moment of, there's an explanation for this, just because the information is going out there. Research, I've taken part in research for into ADHD in women, and so I think the research that possibly should have been done decades ago is now happening, and I think it's absolutely fantastic that the support is improving.
In terms of the support that you have personally, because obviously my experience, we have a very open dialogue, and we have right from the start about your ADHD, and that was led by you. Actually, you were very open right from the outset, and we've kept in constant communication about it, and that's something that's always impressed me. But in terms of what you described before your diagnosis, it's sort of night and day. I mean, you work very hard, you're very diligent, and you've done absolute wonders for the department. So, can you talk a little bit more about the support that you've had, and what you think has worked best to help you be more effective in the workplace?
I think a big one is just being able to be open and be able to say, right, this is the difficulty that I have, and having someone just sort of give you a bit of time to say, I'm working with the coach, and sort of have people understand that there's a reason that there's delay, or the reason that I've lost my train of thought in the middle of a conversation, or whatever it happens to be. Just have that understanding, and people give you a bit of space to try and sort of to process what you need to process. That's been enormous. And I think there's been sort of adjustments that I've been able to ask for. I feel like I'm still working to manage it. And it's very much an ongoing process. But I think for when I've spoken to you and said, right, this, I'm struggling with this. And one thing that really comes to mind is I was getting a bit overwhelmed. Overwhelm is a huge part of ADHD. And I just reached out to one in our learning development team and just said, can you sit with me to help me sort my emails out? And it shouldn't be a big task, but for me, it was just this mammoth thing that I couldn't get on top of. So to be able to say to someone, I just need someone to sit with me and help me sort my emails. And they didn't even really do anything except sort of let me talk it through. And I was able to sort of get a bit of a handle on it. And just to be able to, and essentially that's co-working, which I've found really useful. So to be able to ask for that kind of help, just there's something as simple as, can you sit with me and help me with my emails? Not to do any of the actual work, just to sort and prioritize things. That was enormous to be able to do that for me. And yeah, just to be able to talk about it, it's just been really, really helpful.
Well, that's good, because you've been really helpful in helping me in lots of ways, because I manage an office in the Manchester office, and it's I really am mindful of people who have neurodiverse conditions, and trying to help understand and to help and to make you have the most comfortable space you can possibly have. And we've chatted about a couple of things in relation to that, because I know we were somewhere, and I can't remember where it was, and there was some information about, I think we read it somewhere and we were chatting about it, that people who have ADHD would rather work from home than would work in the office. Can you remember we had this chat?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you said to me, no, that's not that's a broad brush approach. That's not doesn't suit me. I prefer to be in the office. I prefer to have routine. And I
Yeah,
thought that's really interesting as well, because
yeah,
was that just a generalization by somebody? Because that means you could say all humans prefer to work at home, or they're all humans, or is it generally to do with ADHD? But I thought, oh, that's really interesting, because it was all to do with routine, and also um, because, as is common in Manchester offices, we have a hot desking policy, because that's how we work the office. Um, and I think people can sometimes think I'm a bit militant about certain things about it, but the system has to work, and there's reasons behind why the system has to work. And partly for that is because I know that you and other colleagues who have neurodiverse conditions prefer to sit at the same desk a lot of the time, and be in the same area, because that's a space that's comfortable to you. And that's why I'm very keen on people not just booking a desk and then go and sit at random desks, because actually it may
yeah,
make no difference to them
yeah,
where they sit, but actually to somebody like yourself with ADHD, it makes a massive difference to you. And that's why I get so at the injustice of it all, because I think, well, there's a reason behind it. There's a reason behind you
yeah.
do things. It's caring about people. But I
Mm.
think that routine, and having that has been really interesting, and trying to keep that for you and for other colleagues has been a
Yeah.
big thing. But I suppose it's a learning curve for all of us, isn't it, Chris, uh, on what works for people, and in that respect.
Surprised you're having trouble with the desk booking system, Nicola,
Don't
surely.
don't
Yeah,
And
no,
what's
it's
the biggest impact on my mental health, everyone? Desk booking systems. But yeah, but no, I think it's because it's a genuinely caring thing. It's that, I know that there's people like yourself who have requirements that I really want to fulfill, because that's what we want to do, is everyone to come to work and feel their best self, and actually not have feelings of overwhelm, or not have feelings of uncertainty.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about. I mean, reasonable adjustments have been something that every business has had to think about for. I mean, nearly 30 years now. Probably longer, but certainly in terms of statutory legislation, and that has always been things like, you know, ramps for people in wheelchairs, or repetitive strain injury, all the sort of usual thing that where businesses have had to really think about how they look after their employees who need that extra assistance. And it's only really just sort of in the relative recent past where some real thought has been given as to, well, okay, what reasonable adjustments need to be made in terms of mental health.
Mm,
I think our firm does really well on that.
mm.
I mean, you know, let's face it, this is partly an advertisement for Forbes, but what's your assessment of how the firm has sort of deals with sort of mental health issues and the support that it gives?
So for me, I think one of the difficulties a lot of people have is you find out your diagnosis, and the next step you do an assessment and you ask for your reasonable adjustments, and trying to figure out what to ask for can be a tricky thing. You know, it's like you say, there isn't anything sort of definable that will solve the problem. So it's a bit of a process of taking time to figure out what would help. But yes, things like a desk, you know, I've had people sort of come in the morning and say, oh, you know, can you just check what desk I'm on? And then they go, oh, I'll just sit anywhere, and I'm sat there. You know.
I know, I know.
No, let me find your desk. But no,
internally, my blood pressure is going up by the absolute second there.
Yeah, and it's I suppose in the end it's just I suppose, you know, the nature of the office is that we book a desk and that's where we are, and that's fine. I do tend to book my one desk if it's available, but it's just about being a little bit comfortable, I think. So yeah, reasonable adjustments. I've asked for things like just being able to have a quiet space. I think there's interference just from the general chit chat of an office when I'm on the phone sometimes, and I don't know if it's a sensory thing, but I can find I will quite often have to take phone calls in a quiet room somewhere, and that can be a trick. But yeah, just little things like being able to have instructions followed up with emails, or sort of have awareness that if I'm taking minutes, I probably won't be paying attention through the entire meeting. And you know, people do need to sort of check and make sure things have been sort of, you know, all the important points have been captured. Little things like that. So it's hard to pin it down to something tangible, really. But yeah, I think it's a bit of an ongoing process. So to have someone sort of work with me to do that, and to figure out what's going to work has been really good. Yeah, and I think Forbes is great.
Good. And one thing that's really interested us as well is you've been looking at diet and mental health as well, haven't you?
Yeah,
Nutrition.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And sauerkraut and all sorts.
Yeah, it's the thing. So what ADHD actually is, it's your brain doesn't make and doesn't transmit properly neurotransmitters. So dopamine, noradrenaline, or norepinephrine, and those are the sort of two key ones. As I understand it. Other ones are things like acetylcholine, and these are all responsible for all the different areas of your brain that sort of regulate short-term memory, long-term memory, general learning and reward, and decision-making, cognition, planning, motivation, and attention. And there's a ton of research going on right now about sort of how these transmitters regulate the brain, and when you're paying attention to specific things versus where your mind is wandering. There's a lot of really good information out there. So you know, it's becoming one of those things where neuroscientists, they still don't understand a lot of it, but it's definitely improving. But one of the things that I was looking at, it was Neurodiversity Awareness Week or month, a couple of months ago, and I watched a podcast on nutrition that was really informative. And one of the things that can be working for people with ADHD is things like sauerkraut, kefir, yogurt, and what that does, it's probiotic, so it's all about gut health. And if you can increase or sort of take care of your gut health, things like lactobacillus, that can improve the production of things like acetylcholine, and that can improve your capacity to regulate your attention. Because ADHD, you know, as attention deficit disorder, you'll hear a lot of people say it's not really about the deficit of attention. We can pay attention. We just can't pay attention to the right things. We have difficulty regulating attention. So if we can sort of sort the gut health and make sure we've got things like acetylcholine, so our bodies are sort of able to produce that. There's a lot we can do to support our bodies in terms of producing the right sort of neurotransmitters and being able to support our bodies in terms of transmitting those. There's a lot that we can do, and so yes, I've probably not very explained that very well, but yeah, there's a lot that I'm trying to do at the moment in terms of things like, you know, vitamin D and zinc, all of which are supporting dopamine. Zinc apparently regulates dopamine. vitamin D has been linked to ADHD. So trying to get that nutrition right so your gut's healthy, I think it's important for in general health, but it can be used to manage ADHD symptoms fundamentally by increasing the dopamine and noradrenaline that's available to your brain.
Do you like sauerkraut?
Well, I say this. I bought a jar of sauerkraut 2 months ago, and it's still sat on my kitchen counter, and I haven't opened
I
it
love
yet.
it. I love sauerkraut.
What do you have sauerkraut with, Chris? I don't even know
Sausages,
what.
German sausages.
Oh,
Yeah, no,
right.
I worked in Germany when I was 17 on a work experience thing for 6 weeks, and I fell in love with the stuff. I highly recommend it. It's lovely.
I mean, that's what I need. Is that what you do with sausage?
Get
German
some
sausages.
bratwurst.
Breakfast, right?
German
Okay.
bratwurst.
Well, it's barbecue weather, isn't it, at the minute? So you could, get that going. I'll give it a go at the weekend.
Yeah.
It needs to be done at the moment. It's sort of sat there, and I've got a vague intention to sort of open it and have a spoonful of sauerkraut every morning or something like that. But I don't know how long that's going to last. So sausages.
Yeah, I'm not sure about it on its own, but yeah. Right. So yeah. I think if we could just ask just one last question, Nicola, unless you've got something else.
Yeah, no, you go for it, Chris. Go for it.
So just a simple one, really. What's one sort of key piece of advice you could give to anyone out there watching this who thinks that they might have ADHD or want to seek a diagnosis? What's sort of the one key thing that you would say to that person?
I think it's ask yourself, what is the impact that it's having on your life? And give yourself a bit of time to stew on that question, because it's not always immediately obvious. But I would say it's worth getting the diagnosis just to have that understanding. But I think the other thing that I would say is I would very much say that I am still working on the solutions. I'm still working on trying to figure it all out. There's so many wonderful, inspirational social media influencers and people that work in this industry that have, sort of really inspiring. But sometimes I look at those things and think, I'm not there yet. I don't know how you're doing this. And I think it's just important to say, if you still feel a bit lost and overwhelmed, that's okay, because we're all sort of somewhere on that journey, and it's okay to still be trying to figure it out very much. And you're not on your own. And if anyone wants to chat about any of this, then please feel free to reach out.
Oh, that's amazing, Laura. I think it's always about communication and honesty with yourself, isn't it? And that's a big thing about life, isn't it? Because nobody's got all the answers or there
absolutely.
at any time. It's about reaching out. And thank you so much for your honesty today, because I've learned a lot, certainly, even more than I know already. And it's you're just such an inspiring person, actually. You're such a great person to have around. It's fantastic.
Making me blush again.
I tell you what, Nicola, we can't have Pickham. I mean, what a great start!
Brilliant start, yeah.
I mean, just the honesty, a number of things there that were really eye-opening for me, and I think just absolutely superb pick for the inaugural podcast. Laura, that was fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
What's your uplift?
My uplift, I think just being able to have a bit of what's the word, platform, just to be able to say, actually, you know what, that I've got to a certain point, but there's still stuff I'm working on. And I know that there are people out there that are struggling. So to be able to say, you know what, we're not on our own, that's just been huge for me. And it's just nice to be able to sort of explain yourself to the world a little bit. I'm really, really grateful to have that opportunity. So thank you, guys.
Thank you both.
Yes, thank you. And we'll be back in a month's time, hopefully, with another guest.